Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Super-Fanta-Fi. This being a show where we talk about TV shows of the supernatural, fantasy, and/or science fictional genre. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the series premiere of Mayfair, which is a great series premiere. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. So kind of a slow burn of a start, kind of getting you introduced to this world, which I appreciate considering because they kind of don't explain anything. They kind of throw you on a deep end. And I guess that's kind of like where Rowan's character comes into it, because she's going to slowly figure out, like, wait, what's going on here? What are the rules of this situation? I've never read the book. At least with Interview with the Vampire, I may not have remembered a lot about the movie, but I knew the general gist of the movie, so I had that going into the show. This, I know nothing about. This is even the books I know nothing about. Like I said, I've never read them. It's not even something. I watched a trailer for this, like, I think months ago, so I don't even really remember. So I was going in this thinking Rowan already knew what she was, but it's like, no, this is kind of I guess there's almost a parallel you can make with Louis' story of him becoming a vampire and getting introduced to this world. Like the same thing for Rowan, except Rowan's already a witch. She's always been a witch. But because I thought the woman that's being visited by the doctor at the beginning of the episode, we kind of cut back and forth with. I was like, oh, is that supposed to be Rowan like years in the future or something like that? Which I was like, oh, that's actually going to be quite sad. And I think they kind of mislead you in that way to make you think maybe it is the case because of like the blue eyes and everything. But we find out it's like later on, it's like, no, that's her biological mom. So. But kind of getting introduced to Rowan and her circumstances. The moment her mom, like her adopted mom, was like, "Oh, you're crazy thinking like you have some powers or something." I was like, but you know, like I was like, wait, you're not a witch. I was like, and then it's like, oh right, because they even celebrate. It's like, oh, happy adoption day, because I guess because they probably don't. Instead of celebrating like her birthday, it's kind of the day her mom adopted her. Maybe it's more specifically how they look at it, but. I was kind of like, all right, you're her adopted mom, so you probably wouldn't know anything about it. But then she makes calls like, I'm like, oh, so you do know. Which that makes things so much harder too, and it's actually sad because it's like, hey, like Rowan has every right to like be sad like her mom is sick again and eventually, jumping ahead a little bit, dies again, but it's still that thing of you knew and you basically were lying to me my entire life. Up until you died, you were lying to me. Yes, you had your reasons. You were specifically told not to tell me who I really am, but it's still a thing of you lied to me in my entire life. When I started telling you about this stuff, you made me sound like I was crazy. So it like, her mother, adopted mom was gaslighting her a little bit, but once again, it's like you're not supposed to know what you are. And I think that's so interesting. So it seems like she's a witch too, because she's a Mayfair. And basically upon adopting Rowan, you can't like let Rowan ever know what she is, or nor could you ever contact us again. You're basically no longer part of this family. Like that's how this has to work. I wonder, did she volunteer for it, or was she just chosen and she saw it as an honor? Because I'm curious to find out how the Mayfair family works. This isn't kind of an anime, manga and anime reference. But I'm curious, is it almost kind of like the Hyuga family in Naruto? How like there's the main branch and then there's the main line and then there's the branch families. That was always like Hinata. That was always Neji's beef with Hinata because she represented a larger issue in the Hyuga family in Neji's eyes. So I'm curious, like, could it be she's from like a branch of the Mayfair family and it's like, oh, the mainline family wants to ask me to do something. Oh, whatever I do, it's a great honor, whatever, Or maybe it's just like, hey, we're all sisters, we're all family in all of this. So any sacrifice you ask me to make or any job you ask me to do, I will do it willingly. That's why I'm curious. Like I said, is there a hierarchy to the Mayfair family or something like that? So. But I'm also, like, I've talked about this previously, too. I love a story that's told in two different time frames, and they specifically go out of their way to really mask when Deidre's story is taking place, because they make sure not to show you any technology, and it's like, yeah, like, there might be some... I don't know. I'm trying to even think. Did they even show? Yeah, they show some cars, but that isn't always indicative of anything, because, like, people could just have classical cars or something, so... Especially because they do show you Rowan's side of things, like her mom is using a cell phone, like a pretty up-to-date cell phone. So you're like, okay, so they made sure to show you that, but also, because you're not sure if these stories are taking place simultaneously. I think storytelling-wise, I always get a kick out of that, when you get the final reveal of like, oh, these stories. I've talked about it more recently in something else. I don't even want to spoil what show it is, just because, in case someone watches the show, I don't want them going in knowing that. But I think storytelling wise, I enjoy that kind of plot device. So, but getting introduced to Rowan and her life and how. Well, let's focus on Rowan first, and then we'll kind of go to the Deidre side of things. I mean, it all ultimately ends up connecting, but with the Rowan, she is a surgeon. She seems kind of free-spirited in certain regards. She lives on a boat and stuff like that. She also doesn't want to get like chained down in a relationship. So like her and her friend Max have a friends with benefit thing. I forgot what I was watching recently, and it was like, oh, they didn't like the whole friends with benefit thing and made it. Oh, I think it was like the recruit, that line of like, yeah, it kind of makes it a little like sleazy just using that terminology. But yeah, she doesn't want to kind of be held down. But he wants more because it's like, yeah, we're friends, but also I like you. And she talked about like this shadow that she feels like it's a part of her. And now in retrospect, it seems like that's connecting to Lasher, which we'll get to later, especially with the Deidre stuff. But it's like, I think that's what it was. And he's always been there. It's probably almost that thing of like, right, when you can see something from the corner of your eye, but the moment you turn, there's nothing there. You can kind of get a glimpse of something out of your peripheral vision. I think that's probably kind of what it is with the whole, like he's there lurking in it. He is her shadow to some extent in a metaphorical sense, but she can't quite see him until at the end of the episode. You know, we'll get to that soon enough. But yeah, she's a surgeon, and she kind of has to placate one of the surgeons, I guess, kind of her boss it's like, oh, this kid, she's got very good instincts. And she's like, no, I think you should turn him over. And he's like not wanting to listen to her because it's one of those things of, I have this instinct that you should do this, but how do I explain that? You know? But I was thinking like she knew she had powers, but it's like, no, in her mind, it's just instincts. And maybe those are just witch instincts, or maybe it is a thing of there's something like her power is tapping into something. I'm curious to find out where witches' powers come from in this universe. It's like does it pull from like an ancestral thing, kind of like in the Vampire Diaries universe, or is it just kind of like, does it come from nature? Like what is like what does their power get derived from? Is it are they pulling from a source or the ancestors, or is it just all internal stuff inside of them, like a magic pool that they're pulling from? I'm curious, once again, just kind of learning the rules of the witch stuff, because that's always a fascinating thing. I've talked about it time and time again, but like with vampire stuff, like I watched, what was it, like 3 different vampire things at once. It was Reggie the Vampire, Let the Right One In, and Interview with the Vampire were kind of all happening at the same time. 3 different vampire shows, similar rules in some regards and completely different rules in others. So it's just, it's always fascinating because especially because there's not that many just witches shows. Like there've been a handful, but they're not like ever like a whole bunch of shows that are just fully dedicated to witches. Most, there's one I can think of. There are at least 1 or 2. One I know was only like 1 season, so it got canceled. So, tangents and all that aside. But obviously her instincts were right, and her boss kind of being like, oh, I get it. You think you're smarter than me. Yeah, you're like, he was basically calling her out, calling her egotistical. He's like, that's why I'm not going to give, because he's like, right. Did you outright tell the patient not to play with games? And she's like, yeah, I might have mentioned that. And he's like, see, that's my point. I'm like, no, she's playing very mild-mannered because she doesn't want to like bust your ego, you complete another tool. Like, that's why I'm like, he's making it seem like she's so conceited that she thinks she's better than him. It's like, no, I do know, but I know not to push it too hard because you're such a dick. Because he's like, oh, that the fact is that you think you're so smart, you think you're better than me and stuff like that. And he's kind of saying like, yeah, it's one of a multitude of reasons why. Like, he's like, you're not really cut out for the job that you're asking me to like basically hook you up with, because she wants to be in that job position where like at this company where they're researching cell stuff, because her mom's cancer is back, and she's hoping like, hey, if I get this job here, maybe my mom can get a part of this trial program. At the very least, she has a better chance if I'm working here. And it's like, I'm a hard worker, I'm this and that. And the guy wouldn't listen to her. And it's like, because I think that also plays a little bit into why Rowan is very like, you're a surgeon, you're a doctor, so you probably have to play the game, and you have to like kind of keep yourself like in good standing with the people who determine whether you get to keep your job or not. But also I think it kind of ties back to her younger, like she talked about a girl that pissed her off and she imagined the inside of her head and the girl ended up like having a seizure. The same thing happened here. At first I was like, are you giving him an aneurysm? But it's like, I mean, it's like it was like she basically tore an artery in his head. And she tried to tell her mom that. Once again, her mom was gaslighting her. I'm like, honey, like, this sci-fi stuff, it's nonsense. And then it happens later on when she got the new job and her boss is kind of a scumbag. He's like, I'll hire you on the spot. And then he's like, yeah, here's your office. Also, here, I'm going to talk to you while I'm using this bathroom that doesn't have a door. Maybe it does have a door. You just left it. I don't know. I was like, and she's turning around. I'm like, that's weird. And then he's kind of like, because at first I was like, are you gonna like, please don't like this be like a super sexual harassment type of thing. He's like, yeah, he's like almost like, because like the way he was talking is like, oh, you want your mom on that list? You're gonna have to do some things. I was like, but he's like, no, you're just gonna have to bump someone off that list. She's like, well, you can make it 31. He's like, nah, like the people who oversee this type of stuff federally and stuff like that, kind of sticklers about it. So take a name off the list. He's like, who cares? They're just a name on a list. But for her, it's like, no. They're patients. My mom would never forgive me if, like, to put her on this list, she knew that I took someone else off the list. It's really heartbreaking. Similar thing obviously happened to Ray Donovan, and that did not have happy results. That kind of was very depressing all around, really. But yeah, it's like, but she's like, no, I'm not going to, like, you think you're so much better, you think you're special, paying all that money for this statue that you're gloating about, but it's fake. The fact is that you want me to, like, treat you like, oh, you're like I should be kissing the ground you walk on, but you're just a man-child. And, yeah, I think she straight up, unlike the other guy, he's in a hospital, I think this guy's just straight up dead, because also there was a lot more blood that came out. I think, like, the rip and tear in the artery was a lot bigger. But I think it's interesting, too, how that's manifested and how that's represented on screen. Because what happened is, like, there's wood and stuff like that. Like, there's, like, it's not even, like, a real forest. It looks like it was, like, wood growing in a, like, maybe, like, underground or something. And it channels through that, and then we see inside his head. So that's where I'm talking about. Like, I think they're channeling their power through something. Like, there's some ancient thing. Like, I'm curious, are the Mayfairs the only witches around? I'm sure there are probably other family of witches, and that probably end up being a storyline of just kind of like beef between the witch families and stuff. So, but yeah, once is kind of one thing. Once again, she was a kid. She didn't really remember it till just now. Second time you're doing it as an adult to your boss, it's like, okay, that's where, okay, mom taught me how to. 3, I'm like, no, something's up here. Like this, I've done it again. I saw inside his head. I got so angry. And like I said, I think that's why she tried to keep like such an even kilter to herself. It's because like subconsciously she was always scared of that. Once again, her mom gaslighting her. And she ends up contacting her daughter's agent, which I'm like, that's so interesting. Like, I guess that's how the witch world works. That I wonder, is it specifically like an agent gets assigned to a witch that's tied to a family and adoption stuff, which I think is so fascinating. I wonder, like, even though she left the Mayfairs behind because she was supposed to, that's how that thing works. I'm curious, did her adopted mom ever still keep in touch with that world? She had to contact the agent to be like, yo, I'm sick and I'm dying. If something happens to me next time you call and I don't answer, I need to know someone's going to be looking after my daughter. And the guy was Cyprian. I might be misremembering his name. Was like, yeah, I'm going to look after her, which he kind of has to keep up with that later on now that she's gone. But he went by the house, like, because this all like connects to Lasher, and he touched and I don't know if that was like a vision of the past or something, but like the moment he touched it, I don't know if that's like, there's like Lasher stuck in some in-between realm, kind of like one of those things. Oh God, what is it? One of those kind of purgatory type of worlds where it's like, it's a reflection of our world, but maybe like he's the only one in it. There's been shows that have done it. There's one that's fairly recently that's in my mind, and I'm trying to think. I can't think of it off the top of my head. I feel like there is some world. I've seen it happen before, but I'm trying to think what series specifically has done that. Either way, but kind of like this parallel pocket dimension, and maybe he's able to view into it a little bit, and Lasher happens to turn and look at him. But I don't know if that's like because he says like I didn't see him, so I sensed him. But I'm like, you did look at him, but maybe that's not even that. Maybe it's like he can look in the past, but he's like, okay, the guy, he's not here. Well, he's here because I can sense him, but I can't see him. So I don't know how that whole thing works. But also, he was looking up at, it looked like somebody's body was hanging, and I'm wondering, is that supposed to be Deidre's mom? Because her mom was supposedly have killed herself, but they looked like the body was hanging and not. I don't know. I didn't rewind it like I should have to kind of get a better look at what that was going on there. So everyone knows about whatever Lasher's circumstances are, which I'm leaning towards, like, is he supposed to be kind of like a Lucifer parallel or something like that? Because when he was talking to Deidre, it's like, I am everyone. I am a saint. I am a demon. So I guess it's like, I have no real true form. My true form is kind of like the angels from Supernatural, where it's like, there's no, I mean, obviously it's like, if you ever saw an angel's real form, it would kill you because it's too incomprehensible for the mind to really realize what it is. So maybe that's kind of what his form is, kind of, I'm everything and nothing all at once. So that's why he changed into different people. And even at the end, his head was like, like his face was like multiple heads, like on one head, multiple faces on one head. So, but I'm assuming he's kind of like, oh, I'm kind of like the Prince of Darkness. I'm essentially Lucifer. I'm Satan. And, yeah, like he finds like, and it makes you wonder, like, do the witches have a connection? I mean, Chilling Adventures of Sabrina, they're all connected to Lucifer, the witches and stuff like that. So I wonder if there's kind of a parallel in that regard. But Deidre's stuck in this situation where obviously Lasher's always kind of there. Apparently Lasher's been in her life since she was like 10 years old. And she's kind of stuck with her aunt to kind of keep her, I guess, locked away from like not being able to kind of live her life. So she sneaks off to her uncle's place, which her uncle has to be in league with Lasher because he set that whole thing up. It's like, oh yeah, Patrick's like, oh hey, I came over because my friends dared me to dance with you. It's like, no, her uncle set that in motion. You're like, okay. So I guess him and his sisters, because his sisters are her aunts, so, you know, Deidre's his niece, and I guess and because Lasher was there kind of, I guess it's like, right, I don't know whether Lasher kind of like used Patrick as kind of like his surrogate to be like, hey, passing my seed, my essence of who I am through you into Deidre, my chosen one. Because I guess he had a thing with her mom, or maybe a deal had to be made where it's like, my child will be yours, and then that child together, you guys will have a child who will be everything, and that's where Rowan comes into play. So, also like the major, like, oh, like, we bumped uglies, oh, he's dead. She was like, oh, my aunt did it, but I was like, did she actually do it? Or I was wondering, like, oh, did you do it did he die in the process? But it seems like, no, your aunt did it because I still don't think she knows her uncle set that whole thing up. I don't know. Like I said, there's just so much you're like, what does that mean? There's still so much we don't know in this first episode. They set up a lot of stuff that you're like, I'm not sure I'm 100% getting what's going on here to some extent. But also, like, how much does, like, the father, the priest, know? Because she's like, you know enough. Like, you're afraid of my family like everyone else. I guess, because the Mayfairs kind of run, I guess, maybe all of New Orleans, or maybe a very specific section in New Orleans. And it's like, right, you know, my mom didn't jump off the balcony. She was pushed. So I'm wondering, is that kind of implying like her aunts did? Because the way her aunts were talking about it, they're like, right, that poor beautiful child, there's darkness in her and that unborn child. Give us the strength to do what we're going to need to do. So it's like at first I was thinking they're going to have to they were planning on killing her, but it's like, no, we're going to have to take that baby from her and she's going to have to be separate from her baby. And obviously that broke her, you know? Especially after she kind of gave herself over to Lasher. It's like, right, this necklace binds you to me. Now I want you to take the necklace off and choose to be with me. And she did. And then she put the necklace back on. So I guess the necklace was the only thing fully keeping Lasher to her. And now that the necklace is off at the end of the episode, it kind of frees Lasher to no longer just be bound to her. He can now, because that is also maybe technically his child, or maybe because he's bound to Deidre, it bounds him to Rowan as well. So, like I said, she saw the shadow thing at a younger age, and maybe there have been instances where she was able to take the necklace off. But it also seems like for the past decades she's been medicated. So that's why I'm wondering, I guess that by like the more medicated she is, the weaker the bond is that she can reach out to Lasher. So he's been kind of quieted for a while, but because this new doctor isn't giving her a medication, it's like, hey, I want to see who you are without it. Like, do you know what's going on and you're doing all this? Like, are you part of are you loyal to Lasher, or is this something connected to her uncle? I have no idea. I'm going to end up, I've said that a lot, and I'm sure I'm going to continue saying that a lot until the show kind of presents and kind of explains things a little bit more. But I am very interested to find out what's going on, what's Lasher's deal. I wonder, did her aunt always treat Deidre like that because of her mom? Like, it's like your mom was kind of contained in the darkness, and we're always trying to keep, and so that darkness already was in you, and now it's even more so in the child? Or is it because, was it, like I said, a deal with Lasher her mom made all those years ago, once again binding Deidre and Lasher? Going back to the Chilling Adventures of Sabrina, I wonder, is it supposed to be kind of a thing of, kind of like how, I'm curious, does Lasher, it's like, oh, you're my child, or is it going to be one of those weird things of, oh, you are my child, but I also want you to be my bride type of weird thing? So I don't know. There I go saying it again, but like I said, I'm very curious to see where all this ultimately ends up taking us going forward into the next episode. But really, that's all I want to talk about. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day, and goodbye.